All right. Here we are.
Yeah. Hey, welcome everybody to another episode of the All Things Recon. I think we're going to go with interactive podcast, Bobby. I think that sounds good.
Interactive podcast. I love it.
Yeah.
Anybody like we were kind of talking prior to the welcome everybody. Yes, it's our 13th episode. We're kind of talking before we got on here is like, some of these podcasts you listen to recordings and who wants to sit through a recording, it's recorded. You can't interact with it, but I love, having some live interaction with, our people out there who are in the industry who actually, are involved with the recon process in dealerships. So
Yep. So we see anything that people type into the Q&A chat, and if you want to participate in the conversation, feel free to raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from you. Today we're going to be talking about what we call on our side the recon champion, but what you guys might refer to as the recon manager. And that is the person who is going to be responsible for reconditioning for all of your inventory, all your pre-owned inventory from top to bottom. So from intake all the way to frontline. And we're also going to cover all the different ways that we've seen dealers kind of configure that process. And if you don't have a recon manager, if you don't have somebody in that role, what else you can do? What else you can do to accomplish those tasks?
you can get one.
You can get one. You can 100% get one. Of course, Bobby, you and I think will both say 100% definitively that you should have somebody who's what was it? Their main job, right? Their main role is recon.
Yeah.
But we also want to be able to discuss for our dealers who are they don't have traditional organizational structures, who may not be able to hire somebody, at the drop of a hat to perform that role. I just want to advise them on what does the recon manager do, right? So that they can understand what if they don't have that person in their organization to take that responsibility for them, what can they do in the meantime until they can get that role going. But of course, I'm going to advocate first and foremost, you get the recon manager. You put somebody who's going to be wearing that hat.
And recon manager is just kind of the term, the person who's responsible, right? Or the person that gets beat up for when it goes bad. Or, hey, who's got special victims unit on their office door because everybody's coming to you to figure out what the hell's going on with used cars, whether it's salespeople, sales managers, vendors, right? I was that guy. And you wear a big hat. You wear a big hat in that position. A lot of times it's just the internal writer, right? The internal advisor. But Josh, whether you're big or small, there's enough money in doing recon well to not have it just be somebody's part-time job. It can't be the side gig of whichever service advisor's on. You got a shop full of 20, 30 technicians and you're going to sprinkle used cars in with all the customer pay, right? It doesn't go well. Somebody needs to be paying, it's their full-time job to pay attention, right, to what is a pretty damn big number, not only in velocity and turn, but at the end of a month, how much internal dollars, how much money was spent on used cars as a whole? Your number one customer, the used car department. That's a big number. So
yeah, 100%. And oftentimes I think of the dealers we speak to when we talk about reconditioning, well, it depends on where you're at in the country, because sometimes recon refers specifically just to the cosmetic reconditioning, right? So we'll talk to somebody who's called a recon manager, but they don't really manage the entire process from top to bottom. They just do the cosmetic reconditioning.
right.
And then other times we'll encounter dealers who have someone called the recon manager, but really they're just the internal advisor. All they do is write up the used tickets. They're not looking after the process. They don't really have authority to make changes to the process or to dispatch units at a time that they like. And they may not have, the relationship built up with the sales department that allows them to, do, automatic approvals under a certain amount, or it gives them that insight into what's happening on the market side of the business. So it's interesting the way that role recon manager means different things to different people around the country. But I think for us, it's typically going to be your internal writer, but that person also has sort of an elevated responsibility to not only, write up the tickets, but to keep that.
You got to give. Oh, you broke up a little bit there, Josh. I thought you paused. Yeah, you got to give him the power, because I bet you're going to hold him responsible for when things aren't going well, or that's the conversation that's going to be had, right? So internal.
Right, you're also going to reward. for doing well.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that was my next point. Josh, I think we've said it in some previous dialogue, in some previous episodes. There's three pillars to doing recon well. First, what's number one? Have a dedicated team, right? Have some people or a series of people in your dealership whose full-time job it is to do recon well, right? Technicians. Do you have technicians that their sole purpose is to work on used cars, right? Even if in your slower dealership, if that's one or two guys and you're pushing 30 to 50 cars a month, or you got 3 to 4 to 5. Wesley Chapel Toyota down the street from me here, they got like 6 to 8 internal technicians, and they're pumping through 300 to 400 cars a month, right?
Right.
So, that is it. Have a dedicated team and the internal writer, somebody whose sole job is to bridge the gap between the service shop and the used car department. Your number one customer, the used car department. Nobody spends more money on the shop than the used car department. So, with that said, you really got to, have that dedicated team. Rule number two, the second pillar, have a tool to measure it. Well, here we are, right?
Right.
Even though we don't come in here and we don't just talk about the tool, we talk about everything that needs to take place, but the tool is essential. You right? So you got a dedicated team plus the tool, right? If you can't measure it, you can't grow it. Never lose a car. Measure your results. And the third thing to do is to build a culture around it.
Mm.
And you can't build a culture around it if one and two or one of those is missing. So
Right.
dedicated team. If you're small or big, think about it. There's enough money in doing recon well to throw the resources at it to be worthwhile. Your return on your investment will be cutting your recon in half and getting cars frontline ready faster.
We got some results on our first poll question. It looks like of the people that answered, we have 16 people here with 6 people who responded. They're saying, oh, we're getting more responses now. Just letting y'all know, yeah, we do have the polls here, guys. This is really helpful for us. We want to know those people who want to learn about recon. We want to know what you're thinking. We want to know what you care about.
And Josh, when we first started this, at least back in 2019, but recon's been a thing forever. And so, but it's been especially important, especially coming out of COVID, right? We all kind of had to turn into used car lots during COVID. We didn't know what the hell the business was going to do. Supply chains reduced. Holy crap. Used car values went through the roof. All of a sudden, everybody needed to kill it with used cars during COVID. Then we came out of COVID and still retained some of those thought processes of how to do used cars successfully. And, that's kind of put it back on the radar of how important used cars is, right? In terms of velocity and turn, and not to mention just making your lives easier. I found that when we first started, there was less frequency of dedicated writers, right? I think the industry as a whole was just kind of, yeah, well, we'll just, give it to any advisor that'll write up the used car and they'll put it in the shop and it'll sit behind the oil changes and the tire rotations. And when we get to it, we'll get to it. We ran into that all the time. And Josh, I remember a couple times you went in and threw down and, oh, we just give it to whichever advisor, whichever tech. And with a 10-minute conversation that you had with a service director, they all of a sudden had an internal writer and a couple guys, they probably already leaned on some technicians that welcome used cars. But if, you need to have that, you need to have your go-to guys. Yeah. Send if they get buried in work, send the other things to the main shop. But yeah, have your internal technicians and your internal advisor, who we like to call either the velocity manager, the recon manager. He manages the chaos, right? If you don't manage people, you at least manage the chaos, and then you manage the relationship between the shop and the used car department, which sometimes can be contentious.
Yeah, and without that go-between, without that, that advisor serving as the buffer between the sales and the shop, the sales department has to deal kind of in their own way with each and every individual technician, and then the negotiating with them, which they shouldn't have to do. But, on occasion, dealers will luck out and they'll get a really good experienced used car guy, and it'll just be the used car manager and that guy. And that's pretty much the recon process, is that technician and an experienced used car manager. But that's you getting lucky, right? That's not organizational best practice. That's not process. That's just, you got lucky, you stumbled upon a great guy, and maybe you're lower volume, so you don't have that much pressure. But as soon as the volume increases, one guy isn't going to be enough. One phone call isn't going to be enough. You're going to be texting back and forth all day, running away from your other responsibilities because you're trying to keep up with reconditioning. So it's better to just have, take your internal advisor, take one of your advisors who's already on the service drive. Maybe they're a little weaker with people. They don't they don't interact with the customers quite as strongly as the others. That's a great person to take aside and say, hey, I'm going to, you're going to get all the internal work now. And you're going to dispatch to the technicians. You're going to have your own little team. And I've seen that. I mean, I think when I started, Bobby, at least when I was going around the country, that was what I saw most frequently. In terms of, if people were taking recon seriously, that was what they did. They looked for a service advisor, and somebody who was good and strong and fast and had a good rapport with the shop, but wasn't interested in the service drive work, wasn't interested in the service waiter work. Yep. And really, I mean, working recon as a service advisor, it's a good deal. It's a pretty damn good deal.
And you need to make it a big deal. You need to make it a good deal and a big deal, because that's an important person, right? And it's probably a little bit of an unsung hero, in my opinion. But I'm finding more and more dealerships are putting a little more stake in those people because they realize how important it is, right? And then give them the tool to manage, to answer the questions, to raise the flag. He might be the manager of recon, but if your detail department is at 3.5 days, getting cars done, it might not be his job to go have a conversation with the detail department. The service director or the sales department can have a conversation with hey, look, guys, look at this reporting. Why you clocking 3 days on average? Cleaning. Why does it take 3 days to detail a car, right? But you at least have the tools necessary to have the answers, and so you manage the chaos. I like to say it, and but more and more we're finding. The internal advisors. I'll be honest with you. If I walk into a dealership and I want to know everything there is to know about the recon process, I'm going to go right to that internal advisor.
Right. Yeah.
And that's usually the person. When I go in to launch a store and to set it up, I'll say hi to the GM. I'll say hello to the used car director. I'll say hello to whoever, service manager. But the person I want to start with is that internal advisor.
Yeah, that first interaction with the managers always kind of sets the tone, for expectations, things like that. And then when you meet the internal writer, you're like, okay, this is how it's going to work. Like, this is how we're gonna actually do this.
Yep.
And I'll say this. I wanted to mention this in this meeting. We might do another episode on just the lot manager or the inventory manager as well, because I have found, and especially recently, this kind of crystallized for me. But like, if you have the recon manager on a tool like the one we have, and you have your inventory manager, someone who's actually on the lot, making sure that everything goes where it needs to be and is ready when it's on the front line. If you have those two people working together, you can accomplish about 90% of what you need to do day to day when it comes organizationally to figuring out where your cars are at, what they need, and where in the process they're at. If you have those two people in place, an inventory manager, lead lot porter, somebody who's got experience on your lot, who's every day is touching your cars, and then your recon manager, the guy on the inside of the service shop, those two guys can account for 99% of your inventory. They're going to know personally where every car is at.
Yeah. And I would like to, I don't know if I can get some feedback from our customers or something, or from our people that are actually on with us today, guys. Those of you out there, I would like to know how many of these internal advisors are also generating POs for vendor work. And would you see a benefit from us building something in our tool to communicate POs, ROs and POs between the dealership and the vendor, and maybe even the accounting department? So, you're right. So, because that's usually like whack-a-mole in a dealership. You're sitting at your desk, you're managing technicians, inbound cars, recon, vendors, you're calling the glass company, you come replace a windshield on whatever. There's 5 salespeople in your office. And then all of a sudden a vendor comes by, your PDR, your dent guy, dent wizard comes by and drops that, 50, 50 cars, and you got to go through and generate an RO to create a PO, or sometimes you can do it all on one. but holy crap. And you better do it quick, because if they sell the car and all of a sudden 4 days later you're hitting a car with this vendor work, sales department already computed their commissions, the accounting department's throwing a fit, right? I think some
Are you
people
selling yourself, Bob?
some people in our audience can probably totally relate, right? Oh, this is, well, you know what? I'm buried with everything else, and here's the stack of POs. So I'm wondering if it would be favorable, or if some people can help us, um, a way of communicate. You can still do it in the notes of our tool. If your vendors are on the tool, you can at Joey the dent guy, hey, here's your PO for this car. And
Yeah, and
you
Rapid
don't need to
Recon has the vendor messages as well.
yeah, and you don't need to tell them which VIN number and stock number you're talking about, because you're communicating right within the vehicle record, right? So ours has full access. I appreciate that, Chad and John. Yeah, everything.
Yeah,
Okay,
thanks.
so Chad,
Thanks, John.
so Chad does everything in house. It's a dealership's dream to bring all this in house and not to have all these vendors. They come on your lot, they go grocery shopping, and they hand the used car manager did not get up and go out and make sure that they, you know what I mean. So, but bringing everything in house, that's cool. They got their own employees, that they may have trained to do the dent repair, bumper blends and things, touch up and things like that.
I know that's another
So they don't
revenue
have,
stream.
they don't have to worry about the PO thing, but they could maybe worry about how to get flagged, or who to flag, with tags. Who is the guy that did the wet sand and buff or whatever. So there's all sorts of ways our tools can communicate that, make sure they get flagged for things. So
What's been your experience, Bob? I found it varies. The person that deals with the vendors is it's usually different for every dealer. For me, I mean, every now and then, I guess the majority of the time it's the internal writer, but or actually it's about 50-50. It's either someone from sales or service. But I'm sort of curious about what have you seen there?
with the relationship between vendors and a
Yeah,
dealership,
like who's the main go between for the vendors
usually
at
the
the
used
dealers?
car manager has his favorite vendors, right? Or these vendors have been
Yeah.
at this dealership for years, and there's an element of trust and relationship that you built with the vendor. I already know. And this is part of why, we don't need, hey, do the car or you don't do the car. I don't need to know. I probably have already negotiated with you what it's going to cost. Each
Hmm.
dent is going to be 30-40 bucks. And if you do the whole car, 125 bucks, right?
Right.
And you win some and lose some, and it just shakes out in the end. A wheel guy might be, $60 to $80 a wheel. I don't know. It's been a few years since I've actually handled this type of stuff, but one wheel, two wheel, three wheel, four wheels, and it costs you accordingly. So price agreements are already set up, and I feel like most dealerships have a really good relationship with they got their vendors, they got the boys that come in, but then you run into here and there some distrust, right? And where they would like our tool to help, you know, stopgap some of the lack of trust, or they feel like they're getting screwed by one of their vendors. Well, this and that. Well, in our tool, if you want, have the vendor take a picture before and after, right in the notes. At Mr. Used Car Manager, here's what it looked like before. Here's what it's after worth. $50, right? There's different things our tool can facilitate, but I think in the grand scheme of things, to answer your question, Josh, most dealerships have a handful of trusted vendors that come on their lot consistently if they're not doing it
Yeah.
in house.
Well, I guess what I was getting at there is that in this case, the recon champion the recon manager should also be responsible for that as well, right? Should be responsible for the relationship with the vendors, making sure that that work gets done in
Yeah,
a time.
because if I'm a vendor and I want work and I'm coming to your dealership, that's the person I'm going to see. He knows where all the cars are at. And if you're using the tag features within our tool, you already know before it even comes out of the shop if it needs PDR, wheel repair. If you're doing a trade walk, right? The long lost trade walk, right? You're earmarking these cars for, you don't want to put a ton of vendor money into a car and then it fails shop and you send it to wholesale, right? So most dealerships will wait till it's out of mechanical before they address a lot of the stuff. And, you also want to kind of, the recon manager also wants to kind of tackle these things too, and expeditiously,
Right.
because a lot of this stuff, a lot of dealerships put it through detail. We'll put it out front on the front line for sale, and then the vendors come in, my Tuesday and Thursday dent guy, and then they finally get to it, right? But then you probably have a hell of a WEO debacle or a due bill or WEOs because, oh, hey, I sold this car, but we promised that we push out the dent or we fix the dent or we fix the wheels. Now these people are coming back to the dealership. They pull up on the drive. Nobody wants to deal with them because, oh, used car. Where's our special victim unit guy, otherwise
Right.
known as the recon manager, right? Go
Yeah.
get him. He needs to come deal with this customer. And where's the WEO? Who's paying for it? Did you promise it? Okay, I need the WEO. I need proof that it was in the deal, right? Or
Right.
I'm gonna call my dent guy to come. Now it's not
And
just a
no
matter
one
of
likes that interaction. No one's having a
it's
good
brain
time there.
damage. It's
Yeah.
brain damage. So yes, the vendor dealing with the internal writer, otherwise known as the recon manager, has to, kind of juggle these vendors a little bit because you want as much done as possible. You want our cars to stand. We typically want our cars to stand tall, so we stay out of the WEO mess, and you know we have a good reputation for selling cars that look good and stand tall. And who knows? Just because you fixed the dent, you might get an extra $500 to $1,000, holding gross on some of these cars because it's worth it, right? It looks good. Good set of,
Yeah.
gets good set of eyes. So.
Exactly. And that's also speaks to what I would call like active dispatching, or being micromanaging the process, not the people. Like every car is going to be unique in what is going to be what it's going to need, and then what's going to be available for it at a given time. So
Mhm.
you know if we're waiting on something to arrive at the dealership, a part that's back ordered or something, it's going to be a day for the windshield to arrive. We can keep that car on a parts hold and just wait, sit it out on the lot, or perhaps there's a rim repair job, or a paintless dent repair, or just a little paint touch up that we can do, or maybe there's some interior work that needs to be done. And if there's not somebody who is overseeing that process, supervising the process, then they're not going to be able to make that decision about, hey, let's get, while this car is on this parts hold, while it's waiting for this, let's get our vendor into the car, let's get that other work done, so that maybe there's something we can show the customer, or maybe there's something that now it's available for a test drive, whereas before it wasn't.
Yeah,
And
that's a good
now
point.
it's on the front line a little bit ahead of time, whereas before it wasn't. And it's important that your recon managers take active control of the process and are aware of what's going on with the units, so that they can make those decisions. Like, for instance, if there's going to be a really dirty car going through detail, we might team everybody up on that car, since it's going to be, it's going to take up everybody's time. We don't want that, ruining our queue. We don't want that building up time in our space. And or knowing your technicians and how experienced they are, and knowing that there's a complex diagnosis, that you had, that you'd rather have your most experienced technician look at, so that you can save time on that inspection. But you have to be able to make those choices in a deliberate way, and so the easiest way to do that is to have somebody who's responsible, like the recon manager.
Yeah. Yep. You can hear me okay? I had a mic issue.
Oh yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No, good point. It's that, hey, while sitting here waiting for this, let's get this done. Right. You can consolidate steps. Without a recon manager, that would never happen. Right. If it's just
Yeah, or yeah.
if it's your writer on the drive who's being yelled at because you're for some reason you're home of the 3 hour oil change, he's not focusing on used cars and why, hey, you know what? I can have this done while we're waiting for this. That's a great point, Josh. It's another good reason to have a dedicated writer or recon manager. And you know what? Yeah, spiff them on, achieving 5 days or less controllable recon, or closer you get to 3 days. Or we've, as a best practice, industry wide, we say that controllable recon should be 5 days or less. And I know there's been books written about, 3 days, 72 hours, get your cars out there. But what do they look like, right? If you get them out there in 3 days, I can get them through the shop and maybe detail in 3 days, but if you're getting them out there and you're skipping some of the, and I think dealerships nowadays are better about that. They want their cars to stand tall, and that's
Some dealers can
their
make it
theory.
happen, but it's a circumstantial thing. It's not, every dealer can make 3 days happen.
Yeah,
and
right.
and we work with dealers. When we talk to dealers, we take into account a lot of things to come to that. Whatever the goal time is going to be, we ask them, of course, but then we also talk about what's feasible based on who they have working. What kind of experience those
Yeah.
people have, and what the organizational structure looks like.
Here's another thing I just thought of, and I'm going to combine it. So I talked to a multi rooftop, the CEO of the Morgan Auto Group down here, And he's like, I got a problem. I got a problem with stores that are clocking 3 days controllable recon. I know damn well I'm gonna go to that lot and check out their cars, and they're gonna look like crap, right? And so yeah, I don't, if they're done, they're either cheating, smoking the tool, right, or their cars look like crap, right?
Right.
So I'm like, thank you, sir, thank you.
Mhm.
Here's another thing that kind of impacts that too. It's a digital world, right? Most of your customers shopped you online, right? And so take the extra day or two, you make it 5 days and make your car stand tall. Because guess what? I promise you, you probably got pictures and your car's already on the internet, whether it's out of the shop or not. So I think with the digital frontline ready model this day and age, your cars are on the internet. There it is. It's available, to the digital world, to anybody shopping. It's okay. Let's take 4 days, 5 days to get it nice and tall and standing out there. So I think it kind of that alleviates the 3 day push, because
Yeah.
historically, 15, 20 years ago, maybe more customers, more of your marketability was, hey, the car's not physically out there. Whereas nowadays it's more, hey, it's online. So let's do a good job through the recon process.
Yeah, well, you don't reach excellence, just by putting a high mark for yourself and demanding it. You got to take incremental steps to get there.
Yep.
And so that's why when we talk to dealers the first time, if they're with Rapid Recon or Velocity the first time, I always tell them, in the beginning, your numbers are going to look great because you're moving everything that's presently in inventory straight to frontline because you just started,
Yeah.
and then they're going to shoot up. They're going to go up. You
Hmm.
should be happy when that happens because that means the tool is accurately reflecting now what's happening in your process.
Yeah.
If you're getting ridiculous times like half a day, under half a day, on average, you're either like one of those lucky dealers who like only deals in trades, with customers that you have amazing relationships with, or your people are cheating the system.
Right.
Um, so it's important to and this is what I've said this before. This is why it's important to understand what your process actually entails when you look at the workflow. So
Hmm.
that way you can look at the reporting and say, well, how long should this actually take? If it's taking, on average, a day for us to write up an RO, well, that should be 30 seconds. That should be a minute, or
Yes.
two.
How long is it taking you to approve work? That's my other hot spot, right? If it takes you
Yeah,
half a
or
day to approve work, don't expect your cars anytime soon.
or order the parts, or once the parts are in, alert
Yep.
the technician and deliver the parts to them, or have him
And
come
then,
back and get
and granted, we have a couple clients like Holman Motor Cars, like St. Louis. They got one in St. Louis and I think in Miami area. They sell McLarens, Bentleys, Lamborghinis, Ferraris, right? Nothing is going to be fast. Right. So, yeah, let's not try. You're not going to be 3 days. You're definitely not going to be 5 days. You might be the 7 to 10. You're waiting for part 3 weeks out on a part from Italy for whatever. Right. So there's some nuances and
for seat
business
trim.
models have a factor to do with that. But be realistic with your recon manager. Don't set the goals to be unattainable, hoping that he's going to strive to get there. But make them realistic but aggressive, and just live in the truth. You can't be afraid of the
Yeah.
truth because velocity in turn doesn't lie.
And the best way to set that goal is we actually had a whole other about this setting your standards, setting realistic goal times. The
Hmm.
best way to do that is to use the tool for a little while, make sure everybody's on board, make sure everybody who you have in the workflow, everybody you have, spaced out, that they're taking it seriously, that they take accountability for each of their steps, and you will see the averages. You will see what you can expect from your people on average, and you're gonna, obviously you're gonna work with every individual leader to bring those numbers down across the board. But at a certain point, you're going to come to, you're going to come to an understanding. This is what I can expect reliably from my people, and then you give the recon manager the task of incrementally bringing that number down. And you don't have to concern yourself so much with that decision making because you've left, you not necessarily left it, but you've offloaded a little bit of that responsibility to that person, who by now, because they've been at the center of it for so long, they have a really strong understanding of what it is that you need them to accomplish.
And
But
that's the
like Bobby
culture.
said, the person, the tool, the culture, right? The
Yep.
people, the tool, the culture. So just keep that in mind. I guess everybody who's listening, if you're still working with your people on Rapid, and you want to excel that, you want to push that further, just keep that in mind. That's the order of operations there.
So used car managers, go hug your internal advisor.
Right. Yeah.
If you guys don't get along, go out and have beers.
Yeah.
Go play, go bowling
Get
or
that
something.
rapport going.
That's
Yeah.
important. You guys are on the same team, and
100%.
you gotta meet in the middle. I know at the end of the day, it's kind of a collision of pay plans, but you gotta meet in the middle, turn and burn, keep the monster going. So.
Yeah. Well,
All right, guys. Well, that's a half hour. I appreciate the feedback, guys. Reach out if you got any questions between now and then. Josh, our next podcast is always the third Thursday of every month. What does that look like in December? Are we talking Christmas? What are we doing? We're going to get up on Christmas Eve, and I'm just kidding.
Yeah, and then perform the podcast. Let's see.
What are we looking at for December?
That'd be the 18th.
December the 18th. I'm good, man. Let's do December the 18th. 1, 2, 3. Yes, December the 18th will be our next podcast. 3 p.m. Eastern. It's always the third Thursday of every month. And glad you guys were able to jump on. Feel free to shoot us some questions or emails. In the meantime, we'll catch you next time, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.